Dear Naruto Lemon fans, I'm thrilled to invite all of you to my Boosty channel, where you can enjoy exclusive Naruto Lemon scenes in a comfortable and supportive community. Choose from various subscription tiers, from Mini Lemon to God Lemon, and gain access to unique content tailored just for our fans. Plus, subscribers to over Naruto Lemon and God Lemon will receive special mentions in my videos. Support my channel and dive deeper into the world of Naruto today. Dare! Chapter 1, The Banished. Night settled quietly over the Hidden Leaf Village. At the training grounds near the Valley of the End, two teenage shinobi stood facing each other, their clothes torn and hands shaking from the strain of battle. Naruto Uzumaki gasped for air, beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. His orange jumpsuit bore fresh rips, and the symbol on his headband was scratched. Across from him stood Sasuke Uchiha, eyes glowing red with the Sharingan's power. Sparks from a flickering Chidori danced around his right hand. They had come so far together, friends, rivals, teammates, and yet now they were locked in a brutal fight. Naruto's voice trembled with desperation. "Sasuke, please. Come back to the leaf with me. Stop all this." Sasuke's jaw tightened. He was done with negotiations, consumed by thoughts of revenge and power. He lunged forward, driving his crackling lightning strike toward Naruto's chest. Naruto leaped back just in time, but the raw energy still seared his arm. Gritting his teeth, he channeled the Nine-Tails chakra welling up inside him. "I promised everyone I'd bring you home," Naruto said hoarsely. "I won't break that promise." His pupils turned feral for an instant as the red aura flared around him. The ground beneath them cracked. Leaves and dust whipped about as both shinobi poured their chakra into one last collision. The ensuing clash reverberated through the air. Sasuke's Chidori clashed with the bestial chakra swirling around Naruto's fist. The impact sent out a deafening shockwave, uprooting nearby trees and sending shattered rock flying in every direction. When the dust settled, Naruto found Sasuke collapsed. Blood trickled from Sasuke's side where the demonic energy had torn into him. Eyes wide with horror, Naruto rushed to his fallen friend. "Sasuke, don't you dare die on me." He cradled Sasuke's head, his heart pounding. Then came the hurried footsteps of ANBU Black Ops and Medical Nin, led by Lady Tsunade herself. She quickly knelt to examine Sasuke, her hands glowing with healing chakra. Relief washed over Naruto. Sasuke still had a pulse. But the relief didn't last. A hushed roar rose among the onlookers, some villagers, some shinobi, who had witnessed the end of the battle. They stared at Naruto's Nine-Tails aura as it receded from his body. Whispers of "demon," "monster," and "he nearly killed Sasuke" rippled through the crowd. Tsunade stabilized Sasuke's wound. She shot Naruto a conflicted look, part sorrow, part accusation. She'd seen the raw power he unleashed. She knew how dangerous it was. Within hours, the rumors spread. Villagers cursed Naruto for endangering their precious Uchiha. By morning, the Leaf's council convened in a tense emergency session. Naruto stood in the middle of the chamber, shoulders heavy with dread. Tsunade presided, along with the village elders and Danzo. The hush was broken by the sharp voice of Elder Koharu. "Naruto Uzumaki unleashed the Nine-Tails chakra against one of our own. That nearly cost Sasuke Uchiha his life." Danzo, eyes unreadable, added, "We cannot allow a dangerous Jinchuriki to roam freely in this village. The Nine-Tails is a threat to our safety." Despite Tsunade's attempts to defend Naruto, citing his loyalty and all he had done for Konoha, she was outnumbered. Villagers had seen Sasuke's injuries firsthand, fear overshadowed Naruto's previous heroics. Naruto cast a glance at Sakura, who stood at the edge of the room, her head low. She wanted to speak up, but shock and sorrow kept her silent. Kakashi was nearby, arms folded, gaze anguished. He knew better than most what Naruto was going through, but even Kakashi couldn't sway the raging tide of public outcry. Finally, Tsunade spoke, her voice heavy. Naruto Uzumaki, by the council's decision, you are hereby banished from the Hidden Leaf Village. Turn in your headband. You must leave immediately. An uneasy quiet filled the hall. Sakura's eyes filled with tears. Naruto's throat tightened, he tried to speak, but nothing came out. He unclasped his leaf headband, stared at the scratched symbol for a long moment, and then let it drop onto the polished floor. Outside. In the streets, people peered from doorways. Children hid behind mothers. Some shinobi averted their eyes in shame or uncertainty. Others glared with open hostility. At the main gate, 2 ANBU escorted him out. The gate loomed tall, its wood dark against the morning sky. Naruto paused, turning back for a final glimpse of the village that had once been his home, where he had dreamed of becoming Hokage. Goodbye, Konoha, he whispered, voice trembling. And with that, Naruto Uzumaki, once the village's most determined hero, stepped past the gate and into exile. Chapter 2, Ash and Emptiness. A gray sky stretched endlessly above, as if mourning the young man who trudged along a winding dirt road. Naruto Uzumaki, once a bright spark of hope in the Hidden Leaf Village, had been cast out with little more than the clothes on his back and the weight of the world on his shoulders. He walked in silence, letting the hush of the countryside envelop him. The tall trees of the Land of Fire loomed on either side like silent witnesses, their leaves rustling under a cool wind. Occasionally, he heard a distant bird call or the scuttling of forest creatures, yet every sound reminded him how alone he truly was now. Days bled into nights without respite. Naruto slept under the open sky, with no campfire to warm him, half out of caution and half out of a stubbornness that refused to let him slow down. Food was scarce, he gathered wild berries or trapped small game for sustenance, recalling the survival tips Irika-sensei once taught him at the academy. Memories of Konoha's bustling marketplace, where he used to devour bowls of steaming ramen, crept into his mind, making his stomach clench with longing. I wonder if they miss me. He whispered one cold evening, gazing at the crescent moon. Do they even care that I'm gone? But each time these thoughts surfaced, he pushed them down. The images of angry faces, of villagers calling him a demon, of the council's harsh decree, those were like fresh cuts, stinging whenever he allowed himself to hope. It was better not to dwell on them. A flicker of trouble. On the 5th morning of his exile, a distant rumble broke the tranquility of the forest. It sounded like thunder yet came from the ground itself, a dull vibration underfoot. Intrigued and uneasy, Naruto quickened his pace. The further he traveled, the more the forest gave way to scorched clearings and blackened trees. Charred branches jutted from the earth like skeletal hands. Smoke rose from smoldering stumps, creating a haze that blurred the horizon. He climbed a gentle rise where the road dipped into a small valley. What he saw next made his breath catch, a once prosperous farming village, now reduced to ash and rubble. Roofs had collapsed into burnt beams, and fields that once held golden grain were black scars on the land. Naruto's heart hammered as he descended toward the destroyed settlement. Disbelief mingled with dread. He bent down, picking up a handful of gray ash. It slipped through his fingers, dissolving in the breeze. What happened here? Though the place was silent, he picked his way through the rubble, calling out in the faint hope that someone might still be alive. No voices answered, only the wind whistling through the broken remains of huts. Then, faintly, he heard coughing. He spun around, scanning for signs of movement. Near a splintered wagon by what used to be a well, an elderly man lay slumped against a half-toppled fence. Naruto rushed to his side, carefully helping him sit upright. The old man's skin was pale, and his eyes were bloodshot from smoke. His breath rattled. "Help!" he croaked. Naruto quickly removed the small canteen from his pack and offered him a sip of water. The man drank greedily. After he cleared his throat, Naruto asked, "What happened? A fire? A bandit raid?" The man's gaze flicked upward, shadows dancing in his eyes. "Shinobi," he whispered. "Came at night, wore headbands with strange symbols I didn't recognize. They didn't spare anyone." A chill swept across Naruto's skin. He had never heard of an attack so merciless on a small farming village that posed no threat. Were they rogue nin? Missing nin from our lands? He asked, heart pounding. The old man trembled. "Didn't look like any missing nin I've seen. They used large-scale jutsu, set fields ablaze. No demands, no warnings. It was as if they just wanted destruction." Naruto clenched his fists. A swirl of guilt and anger churned in his gut. He wished he could summon Tsunade or Kakashi or any of his allies from the Leaf to help. But Konoha was no longer his home, and he had no authority to claim. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I wish I could have done something." The old man rasped a bitter laugh. "Just be thankful you got here too late," he said, wincing from pain. "They'd have killed you, too." Naruto helped him to his feet, leaning him against the intact side of a scorched wall. The old man's injury was severe, a slash across the hip that bled through makeshift bandages. Naruto remembered some basic healing skills, a technique he'd once seen Sakura do, though not nearly as well. He pressed his palm gently over the wound, mustered what meager medical chakra he could, and tried to stem the bleeding. The green glow flickered, unsteady, but it offered some relief. The man's breathing slowed. You're a shinobi," he said, bewildered, noticing the swirling chakra. "From where?" Naruto hesitated. "I'm just a traveler," he finally said, not wanting to reveal the leaf symbol he'd once worn so proudly. "My name's Naruto." He managed to stabilize the old man's wound enough that the bleeding was no longer life-threatening. Exhausted, Naruto slumped back on his heels. "I'll look for medicine or supplies," he said. "Stay here, don't move." The man nodded weakly. Echoes of war. Picking through the remains of the village, Naruto found a small storehouse with half-burnt crates. Inside, he discovered a few unspoiled rations, some salves, and bandages. He packed them carefully and hurried back to dress the old man's wound. As he worked, the silence was nearly suffocating. "This can't be random," Naruto thought. "Raising a whole village for no reason, it's more like a war tactic than a rogue raid." He recalled rumors that had circulated in Konoha before his banishment, whispers that tensions among the great shinobi nations were once again flaring up. But how could that be? The Fourth Great Ninja War had ended not too long ago, uniting the villages to defeat a common threat. Could it be that, in the time he was consumed with saving Sasuke, something darker had already begun stirring? Once the old man's wound was properly bandaged, he managed to stand, leaning heavily on Naruto. "Are there any survivors?" Naruto asked gently, gazing around at the leveled buildings. The old man shook his head, tears welling. "I saw men, women, children. No one escaped. I only did because I'd been thrown aside and was buried under debris. They must have thought I was dead." Naruto felt his stomach twist with anger and sorrow. This was a scene he'd never imagined witnessing again. It reminded him too much of the tragedies told in Hush around the academy, of villages destroyed during the earlier shinobi wars. "We need to get you somewhere safe," Naruto decided, scanning the horizon. A neighboring town or outpost might have a medic nin or at least a clinic. The man coughed softly. The nearest town is 8 miles west. They might help, if they haven't also been. He trailed off, voice quivering at the possibility. Naruto helped him walk, supporting the man's frail body. Their journey was slow, several hours of steady progress across the charred fields and into the more fertile plains beyond. Eventually, the tall spires of a walled settlement came into view under the dimming sky. The unwelcome gate. They arrived at dusk. The gate of the town, marked by stout wooden pillars, was guarded by 2 alert men in leather armor. Their eyes widened at the sight of the bloodied elder and Naruto's shinobi stance. "Halt!" One guard shouted, raising a hand. "Identify yourselves." Naruto sighed. He should have anticipated this. With all the chaos, travelers might not be welcomed easily. "We mean no harm. This man is injured, his village was attacked. He needs medical attention immediately." The guards exchanged worried glances. Noticing the old man's ashen face, one signaled for reinforcements. Within moments, more guards arrived, along with a short, stocky woman carrying a physician's bag. She knelt to examine the elder, beckoning Naruto to help lay him down on a makeshift stretcher. "My name is Mori," she said curtly. "I'm the town's healer. This man's in no condition to stand." While Mori administered medicine and redressed the wound, one of the guards turned his suspicious gaze on Naruto. "You're a shinobi, aren't you? From which village?" Naruto felt the tension tighten across his shoulders. Normally, he would have announced himself as Naruto Uzumaki of Konoha without hesitation. But that name carried weight, both good and bad. And now, he had no right to claim Konoha. "I'm a traveler," he said quietly, meeting the guard's stare but not elaborating. "I found him in the ruins of his home." The guard's eyes narrowed, but he didn't press further. "If your intentions are honorable, we appreciate your help. But understand, tensions are rising. Word has spread of strange ninja attacks. We don't know who to trust." Naruto nodded, relieved they at least weren't outright arresting him. "Is it true, then?" he ventured, carefully. "That shinobi from multiple nations are?" "There are rumors." The guard interrupted, glancing at his fellows. "In recent months, there have been raids on small villages throughout the Land of Fire and beyond. Some say the Land of Lightning or the Land of Earth might be involved. Others claim it's rogue factions. Hard to know. We're just a small town trying to protect ourselves." Mori signaled that she had stabilized the elder. He was carried through the gate. Naruto stepped forward, intending to follow. Another guard blocked his path. "We can't just let in a wandering shinobi, no offense. You could be scouting for whoever destroyed that man's village." Naruto's temper flared for an instant, but he forced it down. He understood their caution, even if it stung. Taking a slow breath, he asked, "What can I do to prove I'm no threat?" The guard shrugged, armor clanking. "For starters, turn over your weapons. Then submit to a quick chakra inspection. Mori can do a basic check to see if your flow is stable or if you're storing something harmful." Naruto hesitated. The idea of letting strangers poke around his chakra, especially with the 9 tails sealed inside him, made him uneasy. But if he refused, they'd never let him in. He unfastened the kunai holster from his thigh and the small shuriken pouch from his belt, handing them over. "Fine," he muttered. "Just be quick about it." Mori approached, holding a faintly glowing talisman. She mumbled a short incantation, pressing the talisman briefly against Naruto's chest. A gentle pulse of light ran through him. Naruto felt a slight tingle, as if a mild electric current passed over his skin. The woman studied the talisman, her brow furrowing. "Your chakra is unusual," she noted carefully. "Vast, with traces of something else. But I sensed no immediate intent to harm. She turned to the guard. He may enter. Carefully. Keep an eye on him. Reluctantly, the guard stood aside. Naruto nodded his thanks and followed the stretcher-bearers through the gate into a cramped courtyard. Simple stone buildings crowded around narrow dirt paths. Lanterns glowed along the main street, illuminating tired faces of townsfolk who cast wary glances at the newcomer. You'll have to remain under watch until we're sure you're not a threat, the guard said. We can offer a corner of the storage barn for you to sleep in. We don't have an inn large enough for outsiders these days. Naruto tried not to show his frustration. I understand. Thank you. Hushed whispers. Night deepened. Within the dimly lit barn, Naruto sat on a bale of hay, arms folded around his knees. Crickets chirped outside. The distant hum of the town quieted as people retreated into their homes. He could faintly hear moans from the elder in the clinic across the street, evidence of the man's ongoing ordeal. Naruto's thoughts drifted to the Leaf Village, to Tsunade, Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke. Their faces flashed in his mind. They were so close to his heart, yet now an impassable gulf lay between them. He recalled the words of the villagers who had condemned him. The memory made his chest ache. If only. He whispered, pressing his forehead against his arms. If only I had more control. If only I'd found a better way to save Sasuke. But regrets did little good in the present. He forced his mind back to the destruction he had seen, to the old man's story about mysterious ninja. A war was brewing, or had already started. And he was an exile, powerless to step in as a leaf shinobi. But I can still help, he resolved quietly. Banishment or not, I can't let innocent people suffer. He drew in a steadying breath. His immediate plan: ensure the elderly survivor received proper care and find out more about these attacks. If rogue factions truly threatened the Land of Fire, it might eventually encroach upon Konoha. Banished or not, he didn't want to see the leaf destroyed. The hours passed slowly. Despite the weariness in his muscles, sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, the vision of that smoldering village haunted him anew. Finally, near midnight, he drifted into a fitful slumber, curled up on the hay, listening to the muffled sounds of a fearful town bracing for whatever might come next. Dawn of resolve. Morning broke with the crow of a distant rooster. Naruto woke stiff and cold, rubbing his eyes as sunlight filtered through gaps in the barn's walls. Outside, he heard the muffled bustle of townsfolk starting their day. He gathered his meager belongings and stepped out into the street. The guard from the previous night eyed him warily. Nearby, Mori knelt by a small herb garden, carefully plucking leaves and depositing them into a basket. When she noticed Naruto, she stood and approached. The elder will recover, she said, voice cautious but not unkind. He mentioned your name, Naruto, said you saved his life. Naruto glanced at the ground. That's good news. She studied him a moment, then glanced at the guard. We're not used to trusting strangers here, especially not ninja. But you helped someone in need. That counts for something. The guard let out a small grunt, still unconvinced. Mori continued. We could use any information you have. People are frightened, rumors spread faster than truth. If this is a war, we need to know how to defend ourselves. Naruto pressed his lips together. I don't have many answers yet. But I'm willing to learn more, and stop the people behind these attacks if I can. You? The guard asked, arching an eyebrow. Alone? Naruto straightened, the old spark of determination flaring in his eyes. It wouldn't be the first time. I might be alone now, but I have reasons to protect this land. The guard seemed momentarily taken aback by the fierceness in Naruto's voice. Finally, he handed over Naruto's kunai pouch. We'll be watching you. But I'll admit, we don't have shinobi of our own. If more raiders come, we'd need help. Naruto accepted the pouch, reattaching it to his thigh. He gave a short nod. I won't abandon anyone who needs me. He could sense a subdued gratitude in Mori's eyes. The guard gave a resigned sigh, then motioned to the gates. If you're going to investigate, start by scouting the outskirts where travelers pass. That's the only place large groups of shinobi could hide without us noticing. So began Naruto's new chapter, no longer a proud leaf ninja, yet still driven by the will to protect. Though banished, he carried the spirit of the village within him, a determination forged by countless trials. He left the barn behind, stepping once more onto the road. Ahead lay unknown challenges, rising conflict, and the grim possibility of a war that could engulf the entire shinobi world. But through the swirling uncertainty, one truth guided him. He was Naruto Uzumaki, and he would never stop fighting for what he believed in, regardless of where he was welcome, or where he was turned away. Chapter 3, Footsteps of Conflict. A crisp dawn spread pale gold light across the small town as Naruto stepped beyond the gates, heading toward the outskirts. He walked with purpose, yet uncertainty tugged at him. Where to start? How to track down the mysterious shinobi who had raised the old man's village? He paused atop a gently sloping hill, the wind ruffling his hair. Behind him, the town's wooden gate stood as a solitary bulwark, its guards watchful. Up ahead lay a broad expanse of fields, dappled with morning dew. In the distance, a dark line of forest beckoned with possible clues, or lurking dangers. Guess the first step is just looking around. He murmured, recalling the guard's instructions. Even if I find nothing, at least I'll know the land. He tugged on the strap of his kunai pouch and started down the slope. As he walked, the farmland gradually gave way to tall grass and scattered copses of trees. The early light was peaceful. If it weren't for the oppressive memory of the ruined village, this could have been a tranquil morning stroll. But the further he went, the more he sensed an undercurrent of tension in the still air. Traces in the forest. By midday, Naruto reached the edge of the woodland. Ancient oaks and pines rose majestically, their branches interlocking into a shadowy canopy. The brambly undergrowth offered plenty of cover for anyone wishing to conceal themselves. He moved carefully, scanning the ground for footprints or broken twigs, any sign of recent passage. After an hour of meticulous searching, he noticed something: faint depressions in the soft earth, a hint of footprints that led deeper into the forest. Though partially obscured by fallen leaves, the irregular spacing suggested several individuals passing swiftly. The tracks ended by a large pine, where he found a charred patch of ground. Burn marks? Naruto murmured, crouching to brush away leaves. Indeed, the soil was blackened, and scorched bark scarred the pine's trunk. Someone used a jutsu here. Possibly fire release. He stood, glancing around. Birds had gone quiet, as though afraid to draw attention. Treading lightly, Naruto followed the faint burned patches, each was spaced a few dozen yards apart, as if marking a path or boundary. His pulse quickened. This might be where raiding shinobi had practiced, or perhaps they had camped under the cover of the canopy, testing jutsu. The trail led him to a clearing ringed by ancient oaks. High overhead, sunlight pierced the leaf lattice, illuminating a patch of disturbed ground in the center. Pieces of what looked like half-burned parchment were scattered around. Naruto knelt, picking one up. Strange symbols, neither standard ninja codes nor clan emblems, were inscribed in messy black ink. These look like summoning seals, but not any I recognize, he thought. The lines were chaotic, and the ink reeked of something metallic. I should keep these. Before he could gather them all, the snap of a twig broke the stillness. Naruto spun, adrenaline surging. At the edge of the clearing, behind a thick oak, a shadow shifted. I know someone's there. Naruto called, stepping back with a defensive stance. Show yourself. For a moment, only silence met his words. Then a figure slid into view, a man in dark gray shinobi attire, face half obscured by a cloth mask. The symbol on his headband was scratched beyond recognition. His eyes, cold and assessing, flicked to the parchment in Naruto's hand. Who are you? The man demanded. His voice was low, laced with warning. State your village. Naruto clenched his fists. I'm just a traveler. He replied, refusing to elaborate. And these seals, did you draw them? A trace of irritation flashed in the stranger's eyes. Then, without warning, he formed a swift series of hand signs. Fire release, embers of desolation. A wave of intense heat rippled outward. Bright orange embers flew at Naruto like scorching darts. Reacting on instinct, Naruto leapt back, weaving signs of his own. Wind release, gale palm. He thrust a surge of wind chakra forward, scattering the embers and extinguishing most before they could make contact. Even so, several burning flecks caught his sleeve, singeing the fabric. The man wasted no time, lunging with a kunai. Naruto blocked the slash with his forearm guard, sparks flying off metal. Whoever you are, you attacked an innocent village. Naruto growled. Pushing back. Why would you do that? The shinobi didn't answer, only pressed forward with renewed ferocity. Metal clashed in a burst of scrapes and grunts. Naruto deftly parried each strike, scanning for an opening. He spotted a momentary gap and drove his palm toward the man's chest, aiming to knock him off balance. But the stranger's reflexes were sharp. He sidestepped, spinning away and hurling a brace of shuriken. Naruto dodged, though one sliced his upper arm. Blood blossomed, but he pushed the pain aside. Shadow Clone Jutsu. He shouted, slamming his hands together. Two clones burst into being, flanking the attacker. The man's eyes narrowed, and he spat another barrage of ember-laden fire to keep them at bay. It became a swirling dance of sparks and smoke, clones rushing in from opposite sides, while the real Naruto lunged from the front. For a moment, it seemed they had him cornered. Then the stranger let out a guttural yell, channeling chakra into both arms. Fire, wind release, turbulent cinder storm. A violent gust of wind swirling with embers erupted. The clones were incinerated in an instant, and Naruto was blown back, scalding heat singeing his skin. He landed hard, breath knocked from his lungs. The world tilted, and his vision blurred with black spots. Through the hazy swirl, he saw the masked shinobi turn to flee. No, you're not getting away. Naruto hissed. Forcing himself up, he channeled chakra to his legs, pushing past the dizzying pain. He sprinted after the man, weaving through the forest. Branches slapped his face, undergrowth snagged at his ankles, but he refused to stop. The chase led deeper into the woods until they reached a rocky ridge. The man vaulted over a fallen log, pivoted sharply, and hurled an exploding tag. The blast carved a crater, showering Naruto with splinters. He skidded to a halt, shielding his eyes. By the time the smoke cleared, the masked shinobi was gone, leaving only the echo of his footsteps. Survivor's fears. Panting, Naruto surveyed the area. The attacker had vanished without a trace. Despite a stab of frustration, he knew that continuing blindly would be reckless. He turned back, cradling his wounded arm. He needed to regroup and let the town know what he'd encountered. When he arrived at the gates, the guards rushed forward. One look at Naruto's scorched clothes and bleeding cuts prompted immediate concern. What happened? A guard demanded, brow furrowed. You find something out there? Naruto nodded, pressing a hand against the worst gash. I ran into at least one shinobi. He attacked me with advanced fire wind jutsu. I couldn't see his affiliation, his forehead protector was scratched. The guard exchanged worried glances with his comrade. "A missing nin, maybe," he muttered. "But the combination of fire and wind, that's dangerous. They'd be unstoppable if there were multiple attackers like that." Suddenly, Mori, the town's healer, hurried up. She guided Naruto to a small bench and knelt beside him. "You're losing blood," she chided, rummaging for bandages and herbs. "Hold still." Naruto winced as she applied an antiseptic salve. The pain threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced himself to remain quiet, jaw clenched. The guards used the moment to pepper him with questions. "Did you see any sign of an encampment? A larger force? Anything that might suggest a direct threat to us?" Naruto shook his head. "There was a clearing with weird summoning seals. Just the one shinobi, as far as I know. But who knows how many more are roaming these woods." Mori's lips thinned. "If these are the same ones who attacked that old man's village, we need to prepare. We're not a shinobi stronghold, we can barely defend ourselves." "Then let me help," Naruto said firmly, ignoring the sting in his arm. "I'm no official leaf ninja anymore, but I'll do whatever I can." The guards traded uncertain looks. Their suspicion from the day before still lingered, but they also recognized that Naruto had risked his life, and that he had skill. One guard let out a resigned exhale. "We'll set up watchtowers along the perimeter of the town. If you're serious about protecting us, we'll accept your help. But understand, one man might not be enough if an entire squad of shinobi shows up." Naruto nodded gravely. "I'll do my best. I won't let this place burn like the last village." Nightfall plans. Once Mori finished dressing his wounds, Naruto made his way to a small storage barn that doubled as an impromptu guard station. Inside, he studied a rough map pinned to the wall. It showed the town's immediate surroundings, a ring of farmland, then forest, then low hills further out. The guard who had spoken earlier joined him, tapping his finger on the map. "We'll position watchers here, here, and here," he said, pointing to spots at the forest's edge. "Can you scout the southern approach? It's our blind spot, dense woods with fewer patrols." Naruto agreed. Though he was weary from the day's encounter, he understood the urgency. If the hostile shinobi attacked at night, the town would be caught off guard. He stepped outside as the sun dipped below the horizon. Flickering torchlight illuminated worried faces, families barricading windows, small children huddled close to parents. Fear permeated the air, gripping each resident with an unspoken dread. They'd heard the stories, unstoppable jutsu, villages left in ashes. And now their fragile peace rested partly in the hands of a young exile who had little more than determination to guide him. "I'm no monster," Naruto thought, recalling the hateful words of Konoha's counsel. "I'm still a protector, even if they banished me." With a resolve forged in heartbreak, he accepted a rough lantern from the guard and headed south. The dark canopy of trees loomed ahead, full of hidden threats. Still, Naruto pressed on, heart pounding with each step. If conflict was inevitable, he would face it head-on. This time, he wouldn't lose control, and he wouldn't allow innocent lives to be snuffed out. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying echoes of a gathering storm. And Naruto, eyes scanning every shadow, moved deeper into the night, prepared to stand between the townspeople and any lurking threat, no matter the cost. Night pressed heavily upon the small frontier town, its wooden walls and makeshift watchtowers silhouetted against a wan moon. In the thin glow of distant lanterns, the townspeople huddled in their homes, windows shuttered and doors barricaded. Above them, the starless sky stretched like a dark omen, mirroring the anxiety that gripped every heart. Farther south, at the forest's edge, Naruto Uzumaki knelt on one knee, resting a steadying hand against damp earth. He had been assigned to patrol the thick woodlands, a blind spot where attackers might slip in unnoticed. The wind rustled the overhead canopy, sending a soft rain of leaves drifting down into the gloom. His lantern flickered, struggling against the dark. Stay alert, he reminded himself under his breath. You fought rogue shinobi before, just focus. A swirl of memories surged to the surface: Orochimaru's attacks, the Akatsuki hunts, even his battles with Sasuke. In each case, he had been part of Konoha, supported, at least somewhat, by teammates or mentors. Now, he was alone, banished, yet still determined to protect. He took a slow breath, letting his senses sharpen. The forest was alive with whispers of insects, the quiet scuttling of nocturnal creatures, the breeze rattling the underbrush. But were there footsteps hidden among those sounds? Softly, Naruto formed a single hand seal, channeling a thin current of chakra to his ears. This basic sensory trick, taught to him by Yamato long ago, might help him catch any irregular noise. For several minutes, he heard nothing beyond the natural hush of nighttime. Then, faintly, a snapping twig. His eyes narrowed, scanning the black shapes of tree trunks. Another rustle, from somewhere to his right. He exhaled slowly, raised the lantern, and stepped forward. Signs of an intruder. As he moved deeper, the forest thickened, skeletal branches crisscrossing overhead. His footsteps were careful, each step measured to avoid startling potential threats. The ground sloped downward toward a shallow stream. Rocks jutted from the water's surface like stepping stones, glimmering where moonlight pierced the canopy. Mid-step, he froze. A pair of footprints, fresh, pressed into the muddy bank. They led away from the stream, deeper into the darkest part of the woods. He's here again? Naruto wondered, recalling the masked shinobi he had fought earlier. Could it be the same person, or another of the same group? The swirling hush of the trees answered him only with silence. His chest constricted with tension. Carefully, he followed the tracks, ears straining for the slightest sound. Before long, he spotted a flicker of light, too steady and warm to be fireflies. It came from beyond a stand of tightly packed pines. Naruto extinguished his lantern to avoid giving himself away. Moving in near darkness, he crept toward the glimmer. The undergrowth snagged at his shins, but he pressed on until he reached the edge of a small clearing. There, amid the decaying trunk of a fallen oak, a low fire burned behind a makeshift windbreak of branches. Around that fire crouched three figures in dark attire. Their voices, though hushed, carried on the still night air. Naruto couldn't make out every word, but fragments reached him. The orders: continue reconnaissance. Village, minimal resistance. Reinforcements, soon. He leaned forward, heart pounding. So, more were coming. But from where? And how many? The figure closest to the fire shifted, revealing a glint of metal on his forehead protector, scratched beyond recognition. Naruto's pulse spiked. It matched the pattern of the shinobi he'd already encountered. An uneasy feeling twisted in his gut, recalling the destructive fire wind jutsu that nearly overpowered him. I can't let them strike first, he thought. If a whole squad attacks the town, these people won't stand a chance. I have to at least learn more. A sudden betrayal of silence. Naruto was poised to inch closer when a faint snap behind him made his blood run cold. Someone had approached from the rear, and he hadn't noticed. Whirling, he barely had time to register a dark silhouette before a blade sliced the air. Naruto twisted his torso, the knife grazing his vest instead of piercing flesh. "TCH. A spy," growled a low voice. The clash alerted the others. Shadows rustled, and the three figures by the fire leapt up, snuffing the flames in a swirl of motion. In seconds, Naruto found himself outnumbered 4-1. "It's you again," one of them said, a familiar tone. Likely the same masked shinobi from before. Persistent fool. Naruto's gaze darted, judging distances. The forest clearing was cramped, but still enough space for a short-range jutsu. He steadied his breath, forcing his fear down. Who are you people? Why attack peaceful villages? He demanded, voice carrying more confidence than he felt. What do you gain from senseless destruction? Two of the figures exchanged glances, as if his words amused them. The masked shinobi let out a soft chuckle. Senseless? It's far from that. Soon everyone will see the new order we bring, once the great nations crumble under the weight of their own betrayal. Before Naruto could press for clarity, the masked shinobi formed rapid hand seals. Remembering the previous fierce jutsu, Naruto jumped to break their formation. But it was too late. Fire wind release, turbulent cinder storm. A sphere of swirling embers howled through the clearing. Naruto, anticipating a direct attack, braced himself, but instead, the cinder-laced wind blasted outward in all directions like a controlled explosion. The raging swirl snuffed out trees' shadows, turning the area into a kaleidoscope of sparks. Naruto dove behind the fallen oak trunk, arms shielding his face. He felt the scorch of hot embers speckling his skin, burning holes in his sleeves. He gritted his teeth against the pain. Chancing a look, he saw the four shinobi scattering through the chaos, no doubt planning to outflank him. Shadow Clone Jutsu. He shouted, channeling chakra. Two clones materialized in swirls of smoke. Without hesitation, they vaulted over the trunk, splitting in different directions to confuse the enemy. The forest became a battleground of flickering silhouettes. Naruto's clones clashed with two of the attackers, while the real Naruto flanked around a pine, intercepting a third. Steel flashed in a flurry of kunai strikes. He parried, adrenaline surging. Where are your reinforcements coming from? He yelled, forcing the attacker back. Answer me. The shinobi responded with a harsh laugh, spinning away and hurling an exploding tag. Naruto barely had time to leap behind a tree. The blast sent splinters and earth spraying through the clearing. One of his clones vanished in a puff of smoke, destroyed by the shockwave. The second clone darted behind another attacker, hooking an arm around his neck in an attempt to subdue him. For an instant, it seemed the clone had the advantage. But the shinobi slammed his elbow into the clone's abdomen and executed a swift palm thrust. The clone dispersed with a small explosion of chakra. Now alone again, Naruto drew a deep breath, focusing. Kyuubi's dormant chakra stirred, an ember in the back of his mind. He felt it coil, tempting him to unleash more power. But he forced the Nine-Tails' influence down, knowing that losing control here could destroy the very people he wanted to protect. Come on, Naruto. He muttered to himself. You've got this. Narrow escape. Another wave of the fire wind jutsu tore through the area. The swirling flames carved black scars into the forest floor, setting dried branches aflame. Naruto shielded himself with a hastily conjured wind release, Gale Palm, fanning the flames away but leaving him vulnerable. One of the unknown shinobi lunged from behind, slashing with a short blade aimed at Naruto's midsection. He twisted, avoiding a lethal strike, but the blade grazed across his ribcage. A hot burst of pain tore through him. Naruto winced, retaliating with a straight punch to the attacker's chest, sending him staggering back. Blood trickled from Naruto's side, staining his vest. Through the dance of embers, Naruto caught sight of the masked shinobi signaling a retreat. The group's job, spying or eliminating threats, seemed complete. They darted toward the dense underbrush. No, you're not getting away again. Naruto snarled, ignoring the pain and launching himself forward. He managed to grab the closest shinobi by the arm, fingers digging into the dark sleeve. The man hissed, aiming a vicious kick at Naruto's knee. Naruto released his grip to avoid a crippling blow, and the shinobi vanished into the thick shadows with the others. Momentarily dazed, Naruto stood in the now burning clearing, coughing against the smoke. Flames licked at the tree trunks, and acrid fumes made breathing difficult. He stumbled away from the worst of the fire, searching for any sign of the retreating shinobi. But no further sound or movement betrayed their position. They had melted into the night, leaving Naruto alone with the acrid stench of charred wood and his own ragged breaths. Aftermath and questions. Eventually, Naruto found a small stream, collapsing to his knees at its edge. He scooped handfuls of cold water onto his face, washing away soot and cooling the angry burn on his arm. Steam rose from his charred clothes. The cut across his ribs throbbed with every breath. "They're organized," he whispered hoarsely, recalling how quickly the four had coordinated their maneuvers. "They have a plan, raiding smaller villages, avoiding direct confrontation with bigger forces. And they mentioned something about a new order." He grimaced, pressing a torn strip of cloth against the wound in his side to stanch the bleeding. Despite the pain, his mind raced. If that group returned with more shinobi, the town was finished. He had to warn them, help them prepare. But how? Even if he organized the guards, trained them to watch for ambushes, the townspeople were civilians, no match for skilled ninjutsu. Was there a chance to recruit other exiles, or find help from any roving shinobi who might be sympathetic? For now, he had no answers, only the dim sense of duty that propelled him back toward the settlement. The night pressed on, thick with tension, as he limped through the forest. The faint glow of the town's lanterns guided him, fragile beacons in the darkness. Above, clouds drifted over the pale moon, shrouding the world in shadow. A town gripped by fear. By the time Naruto reached the gate, the horizon showed the first hints of dawn. The guards gaped at his scorched clothing and the blood staining his side. One hurried to help him stand, while another rushed off to fetch Mori, the healer. They're out there," Naruto managed between pained gasps. "At least 4 of them. Skilled jutsu users, they're planning something bigger." The guards' faces hardened with alarm. As Naruto's vision wavered, Mori arrived, kneeling by his side. She pressed gentle hands to his wound, focusing her medical knowledge to halt the bleeding. Naruto hissed at the sting but gritted his teeth. "You did well to return in one piece," she said softly, glancing at the guards. "We need to get him to the clinic, right now." They half-carried him inside, past the anxious stares of townspeople peeking from shuttered windows. Rumors of an impending attack spread faster than a wildfire, stirring panic. Some began barricading doors with extra planks. Others whispered about fleeing while they still could. In the cramped clinic, Mori and a few assistants laid Naruto on a straw mattress. By lamplight, she meticulously cleaned and sutured the laceration on his ribs. Her brow furrowed in concentration, the lines of worry deepening. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she chided, though her tone held gratitude. "You're not obligated to risk your life for us, you know." Naruto turned his head, staring at the weathered wooden ceiling. For a moment, he thought of what it meant to be a shinobi, trained from childhood to protect the village, to place others' safety above one's own. Even though that village had cast him out, the drive remained. "I can't stand by while innocent people suffer," he murmured. "If I did, what good would my training be?" Mori's eyes flickered with sympathy. She finished binding his wound and placed a gentle hand on his forearm. "Try to rest," she urged. "They might attack soon, or they might wait. Either way, we'll need you at your best." Naruto nodded numbly. Exhaustion pulled at his eyelids, and he let himself drift into a fitful doze. Pain flared whenever he breathed too deeply, but even that dulled beneath the flood of weariness. Yet in the darkest corners of his mind, uneasy questions simmered. Who were these rogue shinobi, truly? Were they from a hidden village, or something entirely new? And what was this new order they spoke of? For now, no answers came, only the steady drip of water outside, the soft murmur of villagers quarreling about whether to stay or flee, and the faint memory of blazing embers chasing him through the night. Chapter 5, The Last One from the Past. The morning sun barely pierced the veil of clouds above, casting the village in a pale, tired light. It was the kind of light that felt unsure of itself, too dim to bring hope, too cold to offer comfort. Naruto awoke with a sharp inhale, eyes darting toward the window of the small clinic. The pain in his side flared as he shifted upright. His bandages were fresh, the blood mostly stopped. The scent of herbs clung to the air like mist, lavender, sage, and bitterroot, courtesy of Mori's careful tending. The room was quiet, except for the rhythmic patter of rain beginning to fall against the wooden roof. Still alive. Naruto muttered, swinging his legs off the cot. Guess that's something. Outside, the town stirred with wary movement. Guards reinforced watchposts. Townsfolk whispered and scurried, eyes constantly scanning the tree line. Though no attack had come during the night, the tension clung like fog. Mori entered, surprised to see him already up. "You should still be resting," she said, folding her arms. Naruto gave her a tired smile. "Can't afford to. If they come again, I need to be ready." She didn't argue. Instead, she handed him a clean shirt and motioned toward the basin. "Get cleaned up. Then there's something you need to see." A shadow in the rain. Naruto followed Mori through the village, both of them hooded against the drizzle. As they neared the gates, he noticed a small crowd gathered, guards, a few elders, and some children peeking from behind barrels. At the center of the attention stood a soaked traveler, her red eyes shining beneath the edge of her cloak's hood. Her long auburn hair clung to her shoulders, and despite the mud caking her boots, she stood tall, proud, and familiar. Naruto's heart stopped. "Aiam?" She turned at the sound of her name, her face lighting up with a gasp that was half sob. "Naru." She didn't finish. She ran to him and threw her arms around his neck, clutching him as if afraid he might vanish again. Naruto stood frozen for a moment, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Then his arms rose slowly, wrapping around her waist, holding her close. The town fell silent, onlookers watching with confusion or awe. The former exile and the mysterious girl stood locked in that embrace beneath the soft rainfall, both trembling for different reasons. "I found you," she whispered. "I finally found you." Naruto felt his throat tighten. You were looking for me?" She pulled back slightly, cupping his face with her hands, as tears mixed with rain. "I searched for years. After the war, after they said you vanished. I didn't believe them. I didn't believe you were dead. I followed rumors, stories, across burned-out lands and broken towns. And now..." She laughed softly through the tears. "You look like hell, by the way." Naruto blinked, then chuckled hoarsely. "You should see the other guy." Questions without answers. Later, indoors, dry and away from prying eyes, they sat by the fire in Mori's clinic. Naruto watched Aiam as she warmed her hands, her familiar face glowing softly in the firelight. It was surreal, one piece of his past had found him, whole and alive. And somehow, that made the burden feel lighter. "How did you know where to look?" he asked. Aiam sipped from the tea Mori had brought. "I didn't. Not exactly. I just kept moving. I met refugees from destroyed villages, nomads, even ex-shinobi. Some had seen a blonde stranger who fought like a demon but helped like a saint. It wasn't much to go on, but..." She glanced at him. "You leave a mark wherever you go, Naruto." Naruto shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to being spoken of so kindly anymore. "You came all this way, for me?" She hesitated. Then nodded, slowly. You were the only one who ever made me feel like I mattered. Back then. I wasn't strong. I was scared all the time. But watching you, even from afar, it gave me courage. I couldn't stay behind when you vanished. Naruto looked down, fingers tightening around his teacup. You shouldn't have followed me. I've lost everything. Konoha. My friends. My purpose. I don't even know what I'm fighting for anymore. Just trying to protect one village at a time. I reached out, touching his hand gently. Maybe that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Signs from the sky. That evening, the storm broke into a downpour. Thunder rolled in the distance, and the night air became thick with static. Naruto sat on the rooftop of the barn, cloak billowing in the wind. Ayame joined him without a word. Together, they looked at the horizon. You still have that look in your eyes. She said softly. What look? Like you're ready to take on the world. Even when you're broken. He exhaled through a dry laugh. I don't feel strong anymore. I feel tired. Ayame leaned her head against his shoulder. That's what makes you human. But you're not alone anymore. For a long time, they sat in silence. Then, from the far edge of the sky, something strange pierced the clouds. A streak of silvery light, descending not like lightning, but like a star falling. Naruto stood up sharply. That's not natural. A tremor passed through the ground, barely perceptible but very real. Get everyone to safety. He said, eyes narrowing. Something's coming. Ayame didn't argue. As the silver light vanished beyond the forest, Naruto felt the unmistakable pulse of chakra, alien, vast, and cold. Not from the elemental nations. Not even from this world. He didn't know it yet, but his story was no longer just about one boy's exile. It had just become part of something much larger. Chapter 6, When Stars Fall. The next morning arrived shrouded in strange quiet. The villagers, still shaken from the rumors of rogue shinobi and Naruto's injuries, moved with a hushed unease. Children clung to their mothers, and men reinforced barricades with renewed urgency. Naruto stood at the southern wall, his side still bandaged, but his gaze alert. The silver light from the previous night had left a mark, not just a burn in the woods, but a ripple in the very chakra field around the town. He'd felt it even in his dreams, pressure, unfamiliar and ancient, brushing the edges of his awareness like the breath of something watching. Ayame joined him, brushing loose strands of hair from her face. Any sign of what fell? She asked. Naruto shook his head. Not yet. But I'm going to find out. The crater. An hour later, Naruto arrived at the forest clearing where the silver light had struck. What he saw there chilled him. A perfectly round crater, 30 feet wide, steamed in the early sunlight. Trees nearby had been uprooted, yet strangely, not burned. The ground was laced with thin crystalline veins, glowing faintly, humming with energy Naruto couldn't identify. At the center stood a pillar of black metal, jagged like something torn from a distant world. It pulsed with light, and as Naruto approached, his chakra stirred, instinctively reacting to it. The 9 tails within him rumbled in warning. This is not from our world, boy. Kurama's voice was low. Back away. Naruto, ignoring the warning, stepped closer, when the air twisted. Without warning, the pillar flashed, releasing a surge of energy. Naruto raised his arms to shield himself, but there was no heat, no pain. Instead, he was engulfed in a field of stars, floating specks of light, impossibly distant and intimately near all at once. A voice echoed across the space, smooth as silk and sharp as steel. You do not belong here, yet you are marked by sorrow and potential. The light dimmed, and the world reformed. Naruto stumbled back, heart racing. The pillar had disappeared. And in its place, stood 5 women. Visitors from another sky. They appeared like figures painted onto reality, graceful, unnaturally poised, and clad in glimmering, dark-armored uniforms that bore no insignia Naruto recognized. Their bodies glowed with otherworldly energy, each one radiating an aura of beauty, danger, and cold curiosity. The one in front stepped forward. Her long silver hair drifted weightlessly, and her feline eyes regarded Naruto with amusement. Well, well. A creature of chakra. We expected a burning world, not this. Naruto tensed. Who are you? She smiled. Names hold little meaning across stars, but for your convenience, I am called Tin Nayako. These are my sisters, Crow, Serena, Mouse, and our silent guardian, Lady Metal. Naruto's breath caught. The names weren't familiar, but something about them stirred ancient anxiety in his gut. You're not from any hidden village, are you? Tin Nayako gave a short laugh. Oh, darling. We're not from your planet. We are Sailor Animamates, servants of the Starlit Court, or we were, once. Now, we drift. Why are you here? Nayako tilted her head. We followed a signal. This world is fractured, full of echoes. Something here cries out to the stars, and you, little shinobi, are wrapped in its cry. Naruto didn't move. Their chakra, or whatever it was unlike anything he'd encountered. It was elegant and chaotic at once. Crow stepped forward next, eyes dark and full of something ancient. You carry destruction in your soul. But you haven't yet chosen how to use it. I'm not your enemy. Naruto said slowly. But if you're here to hurt this world. Serena, with flowing blue-green hair, raised a hand. We don't destroy without reason. We only answer those who scream for power. You intrigue us. That's all. Why now? Because, Naruto Uzumaki. Lady Metal finally spoke, her voice like chimes over ice. The worlds are bleeding together. Your exile is only the beginning. A dangerous interest. The Animamates didn't attack. Instead, they circled Naruto like wolves assessing a potential ally, or prey. Mouse, bouncy and unpredictable, leaned in and poked his arm. You're squishy. And strong. I like you. Can we keep him? Nayako rolled her eyes. He's not a pet, Mouse. You're not working with the rogue shinobi, are you? Naruto asked suddenly. Crow answered. Those chakra users? Crude. Loud. Not our style. We watched them burn villages. They seek conquest. We seek curiosity. Then stop them. Help us. Nayako's smile faded into something contemplative. Perhaps. If we decide this world is worth the effort. And if you decide you're not just another warrior crying into the wind. Leaving an echo. Just as suddenly as they arrived, the Animamates turned away. One by one, they vanished into flashes of light, each shaped like a distorted star, as if punched into space itself. Only Tin Nayako lingered, her cat-like grin returning. We'll be watching, Naruto. Impress us, or bore us. Either way, your sky won't be lonely for long. Then she, too, vanished, leaving Naruto alone in the quiet forest, heart hammering. The crater was gone. So was the pillar. But something had changed in the air. The energy still pulsed faintly through the soil. What was that? He had no answers. Only more questions. But one thing was certain. His world was no longer just about shinobi, nations, and wars. Now, it was about stars. Chapter 7, A Smile Behind the Mask. POV, Sailor-led Crow. The stars here were small and soft. Not like the ones she once flew past in cold silence, burning behind her visor as she tracked the dying light of worlds. This place, this fractured world of soil and chakra, was warm in ways she didn't know how to explain. The air smelled of pine, of smoke, of broken things, and yet, also of people who stubbornly refused to stay broken. Lead Crow sat on the edge of the village's eastern watchtower, legs dangling over the side. Her crimson eyes scanned the horizon, though she wasn't truly watching for threats. She was watching him. Naruto Uzumaki. She had noticed him from the first moment. Not because he was loud or desperate for attention, like most beings she'd encountered, but because his soul felt like hers. Scarred. Heavy. Wounded, yet burning. He wasn't like the other shinobi. Not like the chakra-wielding fools who had destroyed settlements for meaningless conquest. No, he was something else. A flame that refused to be extinguished. A flame that shivered but never died, even when drenched in regret. She remembered the way he stood when they first faced each other, bruised, stubborn, bleeding. And still, he shielded the villagers behind him. Even after exile. Even after betrayal. "You're ridiculous," she whispered into the wind. But she didn't mean it cruelly. The unseen observer. She rarely spoke much around him. The others, Nayako, Mouse, Serena, they teased him, flirted, tested his limits. Crow simply watched. She didn't know how to talk to people anymore. Not since she and her sisters were exiled from the Starlit Court. Not since Galaxia fell. When she had nothing left, she learned to observe instead of connect. To weigh threats, analyze terrain, plot strikes. But Naruto, he made her forget the numbers. Forget the plans. She found herself standing in doorways when he passed. Hovering behind trees when he trained. She hated how often he noticed. Crow. He'd said yesterday, catching her near the barracks. "You okay?" She hadn't answered. She just nodded, then walked away before her voice could betray her. Why did he ask that? Why did he look at her like she wasn't just a ghost in armor? Memories in rust. That night, as the others rested or flirted or scouted, Crow returned to the crater in the forest. The place where they first arrived. She knelt beside the faint star veins still etched into the soil. The earth was soft here. Not like the metallic surfaces she'd known on moon shards or hollow planets. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metallic trinket, a broken feather from her old uniform. The last piece of her past that hadn't dissolved in the collapse. "I was once called a bringer of ruin," she whispered. "A weapon. A shadow. Galaxia's claw." She clenched the feather tight. But he doesn't look at me like that. The firelight moment. The next evening, Naruto sat alone by the fire pit outside the medical hut. The sky above them burned with dying amber, the smoke from the flames dancing upward like ghost stories. Crow hesitated. Her fingers twitched at her sides. "This is your moment. Talk to him." She approached silently. He didn't turn his head, but she knew he sensed her. His chakra always flickered differently when she was near. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked softly. She sat beside him, arms resting over her knees. "No." They sat in silence for a while, only the fire crackling between them. Finally, she spoke. "You're not afraid of us?" "No," he replied. "Should I be? We were killers, Naruto. We followed a tyrant. I've taken more lives than I can count. Then maybe you're the same as me." She blinked, turning to look at him. "I've done things I'm not proud of," he said, poking the fire with a stick. "Hurt people. Lost control. Almost destroyed someone I cared about. And after that, they threw me away." His voice was steady, but the pain was real. But here I am. Trying again. Not because I think I can be forgiven. Just because I don't want the hurt to keep winning. Crow's hands clenched in her lap. She felt something tighten in her chest. Something fragile and wild. You still hope? She murmured. Even after everything. He turned to her then. His blue eyes were soft, not pitiful, but open. And you still wear that mask? She flinched slightly. It's easier to hide what's broken. Then let me see it. His words weren't a command. They were an invitation. Slowly, her fingers moved to the metallic visor over her face. She hesitated, then lifted it off. Her hair fell slightly across her face. No shield. No armor. Just her. He smiled. Hi. She looked away, her cheeks burning. You're insane. Probably. A beat of silence. Then. Thank you. She whispered. For what? Not looking at me like I'm dangerous. Naruto leaned in just a little. I don't think you're dangerous, Crow. I think you're strong. And kind. And lonely. Her eyes widened. His hand moved, hesitating first, then settled gently over hers. She didn't move away. She didn't speak. She just sat there, letting the warmth seep in through the cracks of her silence. And for the first time in years, she smiled. Chapter 8, The Fire of Iron Mouse. POV, Sailor Iron Mouse. There were 3 things Sailor Iron Mouse hated more than anything. Silence. Stillness. People who looked sad and didn't do anything about it. And Naruto Uzumaki was so good at being sad. Not the whiny kind. The quiet, tragic kind, the kind where he smiled and laughed and helped others, but you could still see the ghost behind his eyes. It made her twitchy. Made her want to rattle his ribs and shout, "Don't you dare go hollow on me, Mr. Hero." But she didn't say that. Not yet. Instead, she threw a spoon at him. Mouse games. It happened at breakfast. Naruto was sitting with Ayam, sipping tea like a calm adult person. Ugh. Mouse hated how normal he could be sometimes. Like he didn't know how ridiculous his own story was, exiled hero, living in a dusty little town, helping people for free. So she did what she did best, she stirred the pot. Boom. Wah. The spoon bounced off Naruto's forehead and clattered to the ground. He blinked, looking up as Mouse plopped down on the table in a crouch, arms folded, grinning like a maniac. You looked too peaceful. I fixed it. Ayam rolled her eyes. Really, Mouse? Yes, really. You're all acting like the world's over, when clearly, I haven't had enough pancakes. Also, Naruto hasn't smiled in like 40 minutes. That's criminal. Naruto stared at her, bemused. You keep track? Of course I do. I'm chaos incarnate. Behind the static. Later that day, Mouse wandered the rooftops, arms outstretched like a bird, leaping from beam to beam. She hummed a song that didn't exist anymore, something from a world she and the others had lost. They had all lost things. Nayako lost her pride. Serena lost her grace. Crow lost her warmth. And Mouse. She lost the part of her that believed someone would ever choose her. Not as a joke. Not as an escape. But for real. That's why she was loud. That's why she was unpredictable. It was armor. Glittery, explosive armor. And then Naruto came into their lives. And for some unholy reason, she found herself noticing things. Like how he scratched the back of his head when he didn't know what to say. Or how he always helped people without bragging. Or how he actually laughed when she made dumb jokes. Not fake laughter. Real, warm, belly laughter. He's dangerous. She muttered aloud, hanging upside down from a rooftop beam. He makes me feel real. The strawberry scene. That evening, Mouse found him sitting by the edge of the village, looking out toward the hills. The sun was setting, turning the sky into melted peaches and strawberry cream. She dropped down beside him with a loud thud and a grin. Thinking about doom and gloom again, handsome? He smiled slightly. Just wondering how long this peace will last. She flopped dramatically into the grass. Wow. Could you be more depressing? He chuckled. You keep me balanced, I guess. Darn right I do. They sat in silence for a minute. Mouse fidgeted, staring at the sky. Hey, she said. Wanna hear a secret? He glanced over. Sure. I used to be really quiet. Like, creepily quiet. He raised an eyebrow. Yeah. Back in the court. Before Galaxia. I was just a tech girl. No jokes, no explosions, no neon pink hoverboard. Just me and my wires. I didn't speak for days at a time. Naruto didn't interrupt. He just listened. Then I realized. She continued. If I didn't make noise, no one noticed me. If I didn't shine, no one cared. So I became this. The walking firecracker. Her voice dropped. But sometimes, I wonder, if I stopped being loud, would anyone still stay? Naruto reached over. He didn't say anything clever. He just placed a hand gently on top of her bouncing knee. I would. Her heart stopped for a beat. Even if I'm not funny? Even if you're annoying? She snorted. I am annoying. Yeah. But you're also honest. Brave. And you never let anyone feel alone. That matters more than you think. Her throat tightened. Without thinking, she leaned over and pressed her forehead to his shoulder. You're really, really stupid. Probably. They sat there until the sun disappeared. The jealous spark. Later that week, she caught him laughing with Nayako by the old well. They were playfully bickering, talking strategy, sharing something. Mouse stood on the roof nearby, watching them with her arms crossed. Her chest burned. Not from hate. But from something worse. Don't be dumb. She told herself. You don't get jealous. That's a feelings thing. But she was. And it scared her. Because for the first time in centuries, Mouse wanted someone to look at only her. The fire confession. That night, she found him alone again, this time sitting by the fire, sharpening kunai like some kind of ninja poet. Hey! She said softly, sitting beside him. He smiled. Hey, firecracker. Silence passed. Mouse pulled something from her pouch, a small charm. It looked like a chibi version of her helmet, but with little mouse ears. This is dumb. She said. But I made it. For you. He took it gently, fingers brushing hers. He smiled. Thank you. Then, before her brain could stop her mouth, she blurted. I like you. He looked up. She panicked. Like, not in a weird way, okay maybe in a weird way, but like, not clingy weird. Just, like, you know. If you ever decided you liked me back, I'd probably explode from joy but also play it cool. Mostly. Kind of. He stared at her for a moment, then burst out laughing. She turned red. You're the worst. She groaned. You're amazing. He said through his grin. Then he did something wild. He leaned in and kissed her cheek. Mouse froze. What was that? An invitation. he said softly. To what? Letting yourself be loved. She stared at him. Then she tackled him into the grass, laughing and crying at the same time. Chapter 9, Silver Tears of Sirena. POV, Sailor Aluminum Siren. She sat by the edge of the river, her long aqua-blue hair swaying with the current, eyes fixed on her own reflection. It shimmered, perfect and hollow. Just like her. Sailor Aluminum Siren had always been beautiful. She knew it. She was trained to be. Her voice could calm storms, her gaze could disarm even the coldest enemy. But no one had ever taught her how to be heard. Only how to perform. And now she was on a broken world, surrounded by dust, silence, villagers who didn't know stars could weep, and one strange shinobi who smiled at her like she wasn't just a leftover from a forgotten galaxy. The siren who didn't sing. Back when she served Galaxia, siren was considered a symbol of elegance and death. Her job was to lure, distract, and erase. She wore her mask like a second skin, charming, polished, untouchable. Inside, though, she was quiet. Soft. She loved poetry. Rain. Music that no one else wanted to hear. She cried at sunsets. And she never once felt like she could be those things without disappointing someone. Even among the Animamates, she was the graceful one. The calm one. The one who didn't cause trouble. Let mouse be loud. She used to whisper. Let crow watch from shadows. Let Nyako lead. I'll stay where I belong, behind them. And then Naruto happened. The music he hears. She remembered the first time he heard her humming. She hadn't meant for him to. She'd been sitting on the old well alone, watching the stars as a breeze fluttered her hair. The tune was something from her homeworld, a lullaby only water remembered now. She didn't notice him approach. That's beautiful, he said gently. She startled, almost slipping. You shouldn't sneak up on people. Sorry, he said, chuckling. But I've never heard that song before. Where's it from? She hesitated. A place that no longer exists. He sat beside her, quietly. I know that feeling. And that was the beginning. He didn't force conversation. He didn't flirt, boast, or make jokes at her expense. He just sat with her. Like she was allowed to exist in silence. Like that was enough. She both loved and feared that. The fear of being chosen. Sirena had seen the way the others started orbiting him, mouse clinging to his sleeve, crow quietly leaning closer when he spoke, Nyako flashing her fanged grin with unmistakable heat. She saw it all. And she hated herself for wanting to be part of it. Not because she was jealous. But because she was terrified. What if he picked her, and then saw the quiet inside her? The softness. The ache. The longing. Would he still smile at her like that? She didn't know. So she kept her distance. She smiled when expected. Teased lightly. Watched him with the eyes of someone too scared to reach, but too heart-wrecked to look away. Until the night of the rain. The confession in the rain. It was late. The sky had opened without warning, flooding the village with sheets of cold rain. Most of the guards ran for shelter, villagers battening down windows. But Sirena was standing at the outskirts, letting the rain soak through her dress. She liked how it numbed everything. That's where Naruto found her. You'll catch cold. She didn't look at him. I don't mind. He stepped beside her, dripping wet, and said nothing. After a moment, she turned her head slightly. Why do you talk to me like I'm a person? He blinked. Because you are? Am I? Her voice cracked. I was an assassin, Naruto. A tool for someone else's war. I pretended to be charming. pretended to matter. I don't even know if I have a real self left. She laughed bitterly. You talk to me like I'm made of music, but all I feel is static. Naruto didn't flinch. He reached up slowly, brushing her soaked bangs away from her eyes. Then let me be the one who listens. Her heart shattered. She buried her face in his shoulder, fingers clutching his shirt as if he might disappear. And for the first time in years, Serena wept. Silent, silver tears that the rain tried to hide, but Naruto felt every one. I'm scared. She whispered. Of being loved. Of being left. I'm not going anywhere. He said, voice low. Not unless you want me to. She clung tighter. A song that's hers. Later, when the rain calmed, they sat beneath the old awning of the barn. Naruto dried her hair with a rough towel, and she let him, face warm, heart exhausted but full. Will you sing for me again? He asked quietly. She looked at him, uncertain. Why? Because your voice makes the world quieter. In a good way. She bit her lip. Then, with cheeks pink and voice trembling, she sang. The same lullaby. No mission. No mask. Just her. Naruto closed his eyes, listening, not like someone hearing a performance, but like someone resting in her presence. When she finished, he leaned close and whispered. You sound like home. And that was when Serena knew. She didn't need to be perfect to be loved. She just needed to be real. Chapter 10, Nyako the Knight. POV, Sailor Tin Nyanko. She hated this planet. The dirt. The smell. The weak gravity. The way sunlight felt too warm. Everything about this place was too soft. Too slow. Too filled with people who said things like, thank you, and, I believe in you. Ugh. And yet. Here she was, striding down the main street of a muddy earth village, tail flicking behind her in agitation, ears twitching at every sound. And it was all his fault. Naruto Uzumaki. Pride and problems. Nyako wasn't supposed to care. She was a fighter, a survivor. She used to burn holes through planets without blinking. She didn't do emotional attachments. That was for Serena, for Mouse, for Crow with her broody silences. But this idiot blonde earth boy with scars on his heart and laughter in his voice. He was changing things. He was changing her. Worse, she hated how obvious it had become. The others had noticed. Mouse smirked whenever Naruto called her Nyako-chan. Crow narrowed her eyes a little longer each time Nyako lingered in the same room. Serena, ever graceful, said nothing, but her eyes watched. Always. But the real problem wasn't them. It was Ayam. The Earth Girl. Ayam was everything Nyako hated. Kind. Warm. Grounded. Human. She moved with gentle purpose, offered tea when people were tired, bandaged wounds like it meant something. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't dangerous. But Naruto lit up when she was near. He looked at her like she was sunlight after rain. And it burned. Nyako had clawed her way across galaxies, bled for power, killed for survival, only to lose to a quiet girl with soft hands? Unacceptable. The spark. It happened during a sparring session. Naruto was showing Ayam how to defend against a grappling attack. He stood behind her, guiding her arms, gently correcting her stance. And Nyako saw red. She jumped down from the nearby wall like a thunderclap. You call that a fighting stance? I've seen baby starhogs move faster. Ayam blinked, startled. I wasn't, this isn't real combat. Exactly. If it were, you'd be Ash. Let me show you how it's actually done. Before anyone could stop her, Nayako lunged, fast but not lethal, aiming for IM's wrist. IM reacted surprisingly well, blocking the first swipe and stepping back. But Nayako was faster. She pressed in, claws just barely brushing the surface of IM's forearm before Naruto stepped between them. Nayako. His voice was sharp. She froze. Not because of fear. Because of the way he was looking at her. Not angry. Disappointed. Worse. What the hell was that for? He asked. She's weak. Nayako snapped. And she's getting too close. Silence. IM's eyes widened in understanding. She stepped back, voice soft but steady. You're jealous. Nayako's fists clenched. I don't get jealous. Naruto didn't say anything for a long moment. Then. You don't have to fight to matter. Her heart twisted. Don't I? Isn't that what I am, Naruto? A fighter. A weapon. You respect strength. You kiss strength. So what happens if I stop swinging? Naruto stepped closer. Then you'd still be the one who stayed with me after the ruins. The one who held my hand when I had a fever. The one who watches the stars even when she pretends not to care. He paused. You don't have to compete for me, Nayako. You already have a piece of me. Her lips parted. Her tail froze mid-flick. I do? He nodded. You always did. Cracked pride, real heart. Later that night. Nayako sat alone on the roof of the barracks. The wind tugged at her hair, and the stars blinked overhead, small and scattered. She didn't cry. Tin Nyanko didn't do tears. But her claws retracted. Her shoulders relaxed. She heard soft steps behind her. She didn't turn. Come to lecture me, she muttered. Naruto sat beside her. Nah. Just, thought you might want company. They sat in silence. For a moment, she let herself lean into his warmth. I'm not good at this. She whispered. Neither am I. She smirked. Liar. He chuckled. Then, without warning, she turned and kissed him. Fierce. Sudden. Honest. When she pulled back, her eyes flashed. That wasn't a competition. That was me. He smiled. I liked it. She stared at him a second longer, then punched him lightly in the shoulder. You better. Chapter 11, Heart of Metal. POV, Sailor Illumina Serenity, aka Heavy Metal Lady. War had no need for softness. This was the creed she had lived by for centuries, long before the collapse of the Starlit Court, long before the galaxy had cracked like old porcelain. Before she had even become a Sailor Animamate, she had been a soldier, a silent sentinel of judgment and finality. Her hands, wrapped in silver gauntlets, had pressed the triggers that collapsed moons. Her eyes, cold and silver like a dying comet, had watched entire cities burn from orbit. She had done these things not because she loved war, but because she believed in purpose. That was what made her different from Mouse's chaos, Nayako's pride, Serena's performance, or Crow's haunting melancholy. She did not cry. She did not play. She endured. And yet now, she found herself pausing. Standing at the outskirts of this Earth village, in a world she should have dismissed as weak, she was not fighting. She was listening. Watching. Feeling. Naruto Uzumaki had broken something in her, and it terrified her more than any weapon she had ever faced. He had not even tried. She'd observed him from afar, at first with suspicion, then curiosity, then something deeper. She had expected a fool, a loud, brash, emotionally unstable warrior with no strategy. And at times, he was. But he was also kind. He carried his wounds openly, like armor made from regret. She had seen the way he helped a child lift a bucket, even when his own body was shaking from training. The way he stood between Iam and Nayako without hesitation. The way he looked at each of them, Animamates, broken women from a ruined sky, as if they were still whole. She hated that. She hated that he believed in her, when she no longer did. Because if he was right, if there was still something human under her layers of metal and silence, then she would have to feel again. And feelings were dangerous. So she kept her distance. Watched. Waited. But even stone eventually cracks. It started during the storm. The rain had been fierce that night, slicing sideways across the fields like knives. Most of the village had gone quiet, the lanterns dimmed, the people huddled in their homes. Heavy Metal Lady, the others still called her that, even though her true name had been Illumina Serenity, once, stood guard atop the North Tower, silver armor glistening with rainwater. Lightning flared across the sky, illuminating the distant mountains. She was alone. Until Naruto climbed up beside her. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, soaked to the bone, his blonde hair plastered to his forehead. She shot him a glare. "You'll rust," she said. He chuckled. "You're the one in armor." They stood in silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching the sky shatter. "You don't sleep much," he said finally. "I don't need to. Or maybe you don't want to." She turned her head toward him slowly. "What are you implying?" "Nothing," he said, shrugging. "Just that, sometimes sleep brings dreams. And not everyone likes those." She stared at him for a long time. "You're too perceptive." He smirked. "You're too guarded." She wanted to snap back. Wanted to silence him with a glare. But instead, she looked back out over the storm. "I remember my last dream," she said softly. "It was before we fell. Before Galaxia vanished. Before the court betrayed itself." "What was it about?" "A song," she said. "A simple melody. I used to play it on a stringed instrument. Before I became what I am now." "You still are that person," he said. "No," she replied, a little too sharply. "That person is dead." She had hope. She believed in ideals. She loved music, and warm rooms, and gardens. "I am what's left." Naruto didn't flinch. He looked her in the eye and said the words that shattered her more than any attack ever had. "Then why do you still remember the song?" Her breath caught. She turned away. The next day, she avoided him. It was cowardly, and she knew it. She trained longer than usual, sparred with Nayako until her fists bled, sat alone polishing her armor long after the others had gone to sleep. She didn't want to think about the melody. Didn't want to think about feelings. But the memory wouldn't leave. The echo of the song hummed in the back of her mind like an old friend knocking on a sealed door. That night, when the village slept and the stars blinked overhead, she found herself at the edge of the crater, the place where they had first arrived. She sat in the grass, back against a stone, and whispered the tune. Just once. Just barely. And he was there. Of course he was. He sat across from her, saying nothing, not even smiling. Just listening. When she finished, the silence between them felt sacred. "Sing it again," he said. Her voice wavered. "No." "Why not?" "Because if I sing it again, it becomes real. And I don't want to remember what I've lost." He leaned forward. "You haven't lost everything. I lost my world. And found another. I lost my purpose. And found new people to protect. I lost myself." He smiled. "Then let's find you again. Together." The kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't like Mouse's playful pounce or Serena's soft lean or even Nyako's fierce challenge. It was slow. Hesitant. Honest. She touched his face like it might vanish. And when their lips met, it was not fire or lightning, it was metal thawing in spring. For the first time in centuries, she let herself feel. Let herself believe. And when she finally pulled away, resting her forehead against his, she whispered. "Don't break me." He whispered back. "Never." And for heavy metal lady, Illumina Serenity, that was the moment her heart began to beat again. Chapter 12, The Swarm. POV, third person, Naruto plus Animamates focus. The first sign wasn't a sound, it was a pulse. A vibration through the ground, not caused by footsteps or jutsu, but something deeper. Like the earth itself had tensed in anticipation. The sky above the eastern hills twisted, stained with veins of violet light that didn't belong in any natural storm. Naruto stood at the village gate, hand already resting on the hilt of his kunai. He hadn't seen the threat yet. But he felt it. It wasn't chakra. It wasn't magic. It was something older, more corrupted. A presence that buzzed behind his eyes, like a distorted echo of the energy he felt from the Animamates beside him. Crow appeared at his side silently, her feathers brushing his shoulder. Her eyes were darker than usual. "They're here," she said. "Who?" Naruto asked, though part of him already knew. The other Animamates arrived, Illumina Serenity gleaming in polished silver, Siren with her melancholy resolve, Iron Mouse uncharacteristically quiet, and finally Tin Nyanko, tail flicking in sharp jerks. Nyanko bared her fangs. The swarm. Naruto looked between them. "What's the swarm?" Crow answered without looking at him. "They were once like us. Animamates who survived the fall of Galaxia. But they chose to feed off ruin, not rebuild. We left them behind. We thought they were dead." "They're not," Illumina said grimly. "And they've followed us. Over the ridge, they came." Figures cloaked in distorted armor, twisted reflections of the Animamates' once proud uniforms. Wings made of corrupted metal. Eyes glowing with sickly light. Some floated above the ground. Others crawled like insects. All of them radiated instability, as if the very fabric of their being was unraveling. At the front stood their leader. A tall woman clad in shattered purple plating, her crown fractured, her face eerily calm. "We found you," she called. Her voice echoing across the fields with unnatural clarity. "You abandoned the war. You chose affection. You betrayed the court. You sided with a man." Nyanko spat into the dirt. "And you chose to be monsters." "Enough talk," the leader said. "This world will fall. And we will begin by tearing out the heart that made you weak." Her eyes locked on Naruto. He stepped forward. "Try it. I dare you." The swarm moved. The first wave hit like a storm. Naruto surged into motion, his chakra flaring, Rasengan forming in his palm as he slammed into the front line. Two enemies exploded in a shower of broken metal and light. Crow launched bolts of precision energy from above, wings slicing as she moved like a shadow between them. Serena stood in the center, her voice rising in a haunting melody that made the corrupted soldiers stagger, clutching their heads. Her song wasn't to hurt, it was to protect, to guide. A lullaby turned into a weapon. Iron Mouse darted through the battlefield like lightning, planting bombs with gleeful malice. One went off beneath a beast the size of a cart. Another took down a flyer mid-air. She grinned as her gloves sparked with energy, but her eyes searched constantly, until they found Naruto. He was already bleeding. Illumina fought beside him, a blade of light in each hand. They moved like dancers, their rhythm born of trust. He guarded her blind spots. She blocked blows aimed at his heart. It wasn't just synergy. It was a bond. Behind them, Ayam protected the civilians. She wielded kunai and chakra threads to create barriers, traps, and escape routes. She wasn't as strong as the others, but she fought like hell for the people she loved. And she couldn't keep her eyes off Naruto. He was fighting like someone who feared loss more than death. The battle slowed as the leader descended, wings unfolding from her back like blades. The air distorted around her. She landed hard, cracking the ground beneath her feet. Naruto stood in front of her, panting, blood dripping from a cut above his eye. "You're strong," she said. "But you're still just a man." He tightened his grip on his kunai. "Maybe. But I'm not alone." The Animamates surrounded him, forming a defensive arc. Crow stepped closer, her hand brushing his back, barely touching, but grounding. Serena moved to his right, her expression unreadable. Mouse didn't speak, she just took up position at his left. Nyanko crouched in front of him, lips curled in a snarl. Illumina stood at his back, straight and silent like a wall. "We chose this," Nyanko said. "We chose him." "You chose weakness," the leader snapped. "You let love infect you." Serena's voice was quiet, but steady. "No. We let it save us." The leader screamed. From her body, darkness erupted, an explosion of corrupted anima that knocked Naruto and the Animamates off their feet. She began absorbing her fallen soldiers into herself. Her form twisted, limbs splitting, wings growing, eyes opening across her torso. She had become something beyond a person. A hive. A queen of ruin. And she was dying. That made her desperate. "I will unmake you," she hissed. "All of you." Naruto stood again, barely. "You'll have to go through all of us." His chakra burned golden, flaring brighter than it had in years. The Animamates stood with him, their energies sinking into the familiar pulse of shared power, no longer separate entities, but a single will. The light pushed back the dark. Even the corrupted soldiers began to hesitate. They weren't just facing warriors. They were facing something stronger. A bond. In the aftermath of the battle's first stage, the swarm retreated, momentarily, but their leader remained. Wounded. Furious. Night fell quickly. Naruto leaned against a shattered tree, trying to slow his breathing. Serena knelt beside him, tending to his wounds in silence. Her fingers trembled. He touched her hand. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but didn't speak. "Not yet." Nearby, Crow sat on a stone, cleaning her blade. Her eyes were haunted. Nyanko paced. Mouse sat cross-legged, watching the stars. Illumina stood on the ridge, silent, scanning the horizon for the next attack. Ayam approached them all. Her gaze fixed on Naruto. "We need to talk," she said softly. Naruto stood straighter. "About what?" She looked at each of the women who now fought not just with him, but for him. "I think I finally understand," she said. "They didn't take you from me. You never belonged to anyone." She looked him in the eyes. "But now, maybe, we all belong to each other." Naruto said nothing. He just smiled. And behind him, the stars burned quietly. Chapter 13, Betrayal. POV, third person with focus on Serena and Naruto. The campfire crackled in the cold night air. The battle had passed, but its weight still pressed on the village like a shroud. The swarm had retreated, but not defeated. Their leader had survived. The threat was still very real. Sailor Aluminum Siren sat with her knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around them, eyes fixed on the orange flames. She hadn't spoken in hours. Not even to Naruto. He was near, as always. watching. Waiting for the moment she would let him in again. Serena didn't know if she could. The things the swarm said, their venom, their certainty, had shaken her. Not just because of their power, but because, once, she'd believed the same. Once, she was one of them. Her hand clenched tightly around the charm necklace she wore beneath her collar. It wasn't hers. It never had been. It belonged to another Animamate. One who didn't survive. One whose last words were, "Don't trust them." Any of them. Serena had buried that memory for years. Until tonight. Whispers in the dark. Later that night, as the others slept in shifts, Serena walked alone beyond the village barrier. She said it was to scout, but in truth, she couldn't breathe. Not around them. Not with their warmth and unity pressing on her heart like a weight she didn't deserve. The forest greeted her with silence. And then, with a voice. "You still wear her necklace." Serena froze. From the shadows stepped a figure in tattered Animamate armor, familiar and broken. Her eyes glowed softly. Her voice was melodic, but bitter. "Did you tell your new human pet about her? About how you let her die?" Serena's voice cracked. "You're supposed to be dead." "Clearly not," the woman sneered. "Unlike the one you left behind." Her name was Virel. Once a fellow Animamate. Once, something more. Serena stepped back. "What do you want?" "To remind you of what you are. You can pretend to be better now. You can dress up in guilt and fall in love with that Earth boy. But your hands are still red. I'm not one of you anymore. But you could be. Just say the word, and I'll make it stop hurting. The guilt, the weight. All of it." Serena looked away. And for a moment, just a moment, she didn't say no. The shattering. The next morning, the village awoke to a chill in the air. The barrier was cracked. Minor, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A hairline fracture. Naruto noticed it first. "Mouse, check the south post." "Nyako, west perimeter." "Something's off." They moved quickly, spreading through the village. Then they found it, a stolen piece of the energy core that powered the protective barrier. A piece infused with Animamate tech. A piece that only one of them could have touched without triggering an alarm. The group gathered in silence. All eyes turned to Serena. She stood at the center, pale, silent. Nyako's voice trembled with fury. "Tell me it wasn't you." Serena looked at Naruto. Her lips parted. No words came. Crow whispered, "You left." Siren finally spoke. "I didn't betray you. I didn't give them anything." "But you were with them," Illumina said, her voice like metal tearing. "We can feel it." Serena shook her head. "She came to me. Virel. She offered, but I said no." "Did you?" Nyako snapped. "Because the barrier's broken. And they knew exactly where to strike." Naruto stepped forward, gently taking Serena's hand. "Did you help them?" "No," she whispered. "But I didn't stop them either." Silence. Mouse turned away. Crow closed her eyes. Illumina's hand curled into a fist. "And Nyako just broke." "Then you chose them," she said. "And you lied to us." Serena reached toward her, desperate. "Please." Nyako slapped her hand away. "Don't." Serena turned to Naruto, eyes wide with guilt and grief. "I didn't mean to." "I know," he said, softly. And that was the worst part. He still believed in her. Fallout. That night, Serena left the village. Not with the swarm. Not with her sisters. Alone. Naruto stood at the edge of the path, watching her silhouette disappear between the trees. He didn't try to stop her. Not because he was angry, but because she needed to choose her path alone now. Ayam stood beside him. "She'll come back," she said. Naruto's voice was low. "I hope so. She loves you." "I know." He didn't say "I love her too." But he did. Somewhere else. In the dark, Serena walked. Behind her, the necklace swung gently. Ahead, the forest whispered. And somewhere far above, the stars watched. Waiting. Chapter 14, The Abyss of Memory. POV, Naruto, Dreamscape. Darkness. But not the kind that scares. Not the kind that swallows. This was the kind of darkness that waited. The kind that remembered. Naruto floated in it. Or maybe walked. Or maybe just existed. There was no sound, no wind, no earth underfoot. Only flickers. Sparks. Echoes of moments he hadn't thought about in years. Konoha. The bridge where he fought Sasuke. The Ichiraku stand where Ayam once smiled at him before life became complicated. His old apartment. The cracked photo frame on the windowsill. And then. The voice. "So you're finally here again." Naruto turned. A figure stepped from the shadows. Tall. Blonde. A white cloak fluttering behind him like memory. Minato Namikaze. The fourth Hokage. His father. Naruto's throat tightened. "Is this a dream?" Minato smiled gently. "Something like that. A dream. A seal. An echo. We've been here before, haven't we?" Naruto nodded. "When I was 16. When you helped me stop the fox." "Kurama," Minato corrected softly. "He stopped being just the fox. You helped him become more." Naruto looked around. The space shimmered, shifting like water. "Why am I here now? I didn't trigger the seal again." Minato knelt in front of him. "Because your soul is at a crossroads." The mother's touch. Another presence entered the dream space. Warm. Radiant. Naruto turned and felt his heart break all over again. Kushina Uzumaki. His mother. Her hair drifted like a red flame in the void. She didn't speak at first. She just hugged him. And suddenly, he was a child again. Not the fighter. Not the protector. Just a son. "I missed you," he choked out. Kushina smiled, brushing his hair like she had the first time he met her. "You've grown even stronger than I imagined. But I can see how tired you are, my boy." Naruto sank into the embrace. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I was supposed to bring Sasuke back. Protect Konoha. Then they turned on me. Banished me. I lost everything. And now. I have new people. I love them. But part of me still wants to go back." Minato and Kushina exchanged a look. "You're afraid to move on," Minato said. "Because if you do, you think it means forgetting." Naruto nodded. "Yeah. Like if I stop carrying the old world, I'm betraying it." "But that world betrayed you," Kushina said firmly. "That village forgot what you stood for. What you are. Don't forget them, but don't chain yourself to them." Naruto's fists clenched. "I just want to do what's right." "You are," Minato said. "You protected people even when you were hated. Now you protect people who love you. That's not failure. That's growth." The beast and the boy. The shadows deepened. A massive eye opened in the void. Red. Slitted. Familiar. Kurama. The nine-tailed fox, no longer monstrous, but no less powerful. He spoke slowly, voice low and resonant. You've carried me your whole life. Fought against me. Then with me. We are bound, Naruto. But even I can see your heart is changing. Naruto approached the glowing eye. I didn't forget you. I still feel you. But you're not angry anymore. Not like before. You're soft. And I don't hate it. Kurama's form slowly took shape, faint, transparent, towering. I used to feed on your pain. Now I guard your peace. And that peace is fragile. Naruto looked up. You think I'll lose it? No. I think you're about to fight harder for it than you ever did for vengeance. The final door. A ripple passed through the dream space. The darkness thinned. The world pulsed with golden light. Minato placed a hand on Naruto's shoulder. You've carried enough ghosts. It's time to stop walking backward. Kushina cupped his cheek. Let yourself live. A door appeared ahead, simple wood, glowing faintly. Naruto stepped toward it. Behind him, his father and mother watched. We'll always be here, Minato said. Don't waste your life being stuck in ours, Kushina whispered. Naruto opened the door. And stepped into light. Awakening. He gasped awake. The sun had barely risen. He sat in his bedroll, shirt damp with sweat, eyes wide. The others were still sleeping. Crow sat on a nearby rooftop, pretending not to watch him. Nayako's tail flicked in her sleep. Illumina, back straight, stood in silent vigil. Mouse snored like a puppy curled in a blanket. And Serena was still gone. Ayam stirred beside the fire. Their eyes met. You okay? She asked gently. Naruto nodded. No, he admitted. But I will be. A new fire. That morning, he gathered them all. He told them everything. About the dream. About Minato. Kushina. Kurama. The pain he'd carried. The fear of forgetting. And how he was finally done running from it. The Animamates listened in silence. Not judging. Not mocking. Just there. Nayako smirked. Took you long enough, Whiskers. Crow stepped closer, brushing his shoulder. Mouse grinned. So you're officially ours now, huh? Illumina didn't speak, but her gaze softened. Ayam took his hand. We already knew. Naruto exhaled. I don't know what happens next, he said. Serena's absence still hurt. The swarm was still out there. The world was still broken. But his heart was not. Not anymore. Chapter 15, Universal Threat. POV, third person with focus on Naruto and Serena. The sky was wrong. That was the first thing Illumina Serenity said as she stared upward from the North Tower, her silver eyes narrowed. The stars above shimmered, but not in the way they should. They were trembling. Shifting. As if space itself had grown unsteady. They're accelerating it, she said quietly. The swarm is no longer trying to conquer. Nayako joined her. Then what are they doing? Breaking the sky. Naruto stepped forward, arms crossed. He felt it too, a pressure deep in his bones. The same sensation that haunted his dream. The same pulse he had ignored for too long. What's happening? He asked. Illumina's answer was simple. Stellar collapse. The collapse. They gathered around the central flame of the village, the 6 of them, Naruto and the remaining Animamates. Ayam stood nearby, listening with growing dread as Illumina explained. The collapse is not an explosion. It's not a weapon. It's a collapse of cosmic structure. When the starlit court fell, the swarm began tampering with interstellar ley lines, energy rivers that connect entire realities. Most of them are stable. But if they unravel? She looked up again. Worlds bleed into one another. Stars die. Boundaries break. Crow added, they don't want to conquer. They want to undo. Because they can't have the universe as it is, they'll turn it into nothing. Mouse sat with her knees up, ears lowered. So what? We're in the eye of it? No, said Illumina. We're at its heart. The return of Serena. That night, as the stars shimmered and the sky pulsed like a dying heartbeat, a soft sound echoed through the forest. A song. Low. Fragile. Familiar. Naruto was the first to rise. He ran toward the sound. And there, beneath the branches of a blooming tree that hadn't been there the day before, stood Serena. She looked pale. Her dress was torn. Her energy flickered like a candle in wind. But her eyes burned with purpose. I couldn't run from it, she said softly as he reached her. I tried. I thought if I left, I wouldn't hurt you. But I was wrong. Naruto didn't speak. He just stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her. Serena trembled. I saw it, she whispered into his chest. The collapse. I heard it. The swarm has tapped into a world seed. They're going to trigger it. And when they do. Her voice broke. It won't be just us. It'll be everything. Reunion and resolve. Serena returned to camp at dawn. The others were wary, especially Nayako, but no one spoke against her. Not after seeing the tears on her face. Not after feeling the same raw terror in the sky that she had witnessed firsthand. Illumina confirmed it. If they activate the seed, it could breach every plane connected to this one. Naruto turned to them all. Then we stop them. Together. Mouse raised an eyebrow. No more running. No more running, he confirmed. Crow stepped forward. We'll need a plan. Their hive is deep beyond the crater. They've built something there, a spire. That's where the seed is. Ayam tightened her grip on her weapons. We protect the villagers. But we go. Naruto nodded. And this time, we end it. Meanwhile, in the spire. Far away, beneath a sky that bled black light, the leader of the swarm stood at the base of the stellar spire, a structure made of fractured metal, cosmic veins, and pulsating orbs. Behind her, corrupted Animamates stood silently, twitching, humming. The world seed pulsed between curved spires, glowing blue and red, like a heartbeat out of rhythm. The leader extended her hand toward it. So close, she whispered. Let the stars fall. And the collapse answered. Chapter 16, The Price of Love. POV, Naruto, internal plus real-time. The battlefield had not yet been drawn, but the war had already begun. The village was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds had fled. Clouds gathered low over the trees. The earth hummed with the unnatural rhythm of the collapsing ley lines, the sky bending where it should not bend. Naruto stood alone at the edge of the clearing. Behind him, the Animamates slept fitfully in the hours before the march. Ahead of him was the fracture. A thin, vertical slit in the air, barely visible, like glass cracking reality. Illumina had warned him about it, a rupture. A pocket left behind by a dying star. No one could enter it. Not without being erased. But now, in the night's cold silence, the fracture called him. And when he touched it, the world fell away. The garden of what could have been. He opened his eyes in a world that wasn't real. Blue skies. Fresh air. Wind through the trees of Konoha. Children laughing. Irika waving from the academy steps. Ichiraku, untouched by time. And walking toward him, as casually as if nothing had ever gone wrong, were Minato and Kushina. Alive. Smiling. Naruto couldn't speak. Kushina hugged him first. Minato placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You did it," his father said. "You protected everyone." "You're home," his mother whispered. And behind them, the rest. Kakashi, with both eyes. Sakura, unburdened. Sasuke, smiling. As if none of it had ever happened. As if the pain had been rewritten. The voice of the rift. A new presence stood nearby. Cloaked. Unseen face. But the voice was unmistakable, it echoed with a tone beyond chakra, beyond stars. Something cosmic. "You deserve this. You suffered. You saved lives. You were cast out unfairly. This is your reward." Naruto turned. "This isn't real. But it can be. You can go back. Prevent the exile. Stop the war. Save Konoha. Have your parents. Your village. Your legacy." He stared at the illusion. The warmth of his mother's embrace. The smell of ramen in the air. Everything he'd lost. "What's the cost?" he asked. The voice was calm. "The fracture can only be mended if you stay. Time will seal your soul with it. You will never return to that other world." Naruto's throat tightened. "And the others? They will survive. But without you. They will forget you in time. The collapse will pass. But you will no longer be part of it." The heart's war. He saw them in his mind, as clear as if they were standing before him. Crow, watching silently over his sleep. Mouse, laughing through pain. Nyako, stubborn and secretly afraid. Illumina, learning how to feel again. Serena, fragile but trying to heal. I Am, who never stopped believing in him. He dropped to his knees. This world felt so perfect. So safe. And so fake. His hands trembled. He remembered what Kushina said in his dream. "Don't waste your life being stuck in ours." He remembered what Minato said. "You already did enough." And Naruto stood. "I loved them," he whispered. "All of them. Even the village. Even Sasuke. But I'm not that boy anymore." He turned from the dream. "I'm not going back. Return through fire." The illusion cracked. The world twisted and screamed, as if reality itself rejected his choice. The fracture flared. Naruto fell through. When he landed, the world was real again, harsh wind, cold dirt, starlight through clouds. The others found him moments later. Crow knelt first. "You disappeared." "I'm back," he said simply. Serena touched his shoulder. "Where did you go?" He looked around at all of them, bruised, tired, waiting. "To a world I thought I wanted." "And?" Mouse asked. "I chose this one. The storm begins." Far above, the swarm completed their final chant. The stellar spire pulsed with light. The world seed cracked open. The collapse began. And the sky began to fall. Chapter 17, You Are Not Alone. POV, third person, with emotional focus on all characters. The air had changed. It wasn't just the rumbling in the sky or the pulsing energy from the stellar spire. It was something deeper. A stillness before the storm. The kind of silence that carried the weight of what might be final words. They all felt it. Naruto stood near the edge of the village, his gaze locked on the distant horizon where the collapse had begun to fracture the sky. Silver veins spread across the atmosphere like cracks in glass. The stars above no longer blinked, they burned. steady, bright, and afraid. Behind him, the women he had fought beside, and loved, gathered for what might be their last night before the end. I am. She was the first to speak. She stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly, fingers trembling. I thought I was just chasing a memory, she said. The boy who smiled at me through ramen steam. The one who made me feel seen when no one else did. Naruto turned toward her, surprised. But then I met this Naruto. The man who keeps fighting even when the whole world gives him nothing. The man who carries people like their stars in his hands. I don't know what happens tomorrow. But tonight. She reached up and cupped his face. Know that you were always worth finding. She kissed his forehead and stepped back into the firelight. Iron Mouse. Mouse didn't wait. She jumped into his arms, burying her face in his chest. Damn it, I don't know how to say stuff like this, she muttered. I joke because I'm scared. I tease because I think if I don't sparkle, I'll be forgotten. She looked up at him, her smile trembling. But you looked at me. The real me. The one under all the neon noise. She reached into her pocket and pressed a small charm into his hand, a tiny metal mouse. My luck. Yours now. So you better come back. He held it tightly. I will, he said. Led Crow. Crow stood a few feet away, staring into the fire. She didn't speak at first. She didn't know how. Words were weapons to her, sharp, cautious things. I was broken before I met you, she said quietly. I didn't want to be saved. I just wanted to be useful. Naruto stepped closer. You made me feel like I mattered. Not because I was deadly. But because I stayed. She finally turned. Her eyes were wet. You're the first person I ever trusted to see behind the feathers. Naruto embraced her, and she leaned into it for just a moment. Tin Nyanko. You drive me insane, Nayako said, folding her arms. Her voice was tight. You don't know when to quit. You hug people who don't deserve it. You forgive like it's easy. You made me soft, Naruto. She paused. And I hate you for that. He blinked. Wait. I also love you, she added quickly. So don't die, or I'll kill you. Then she kissed him, fierce, fast, and completely Nayako. Mouse hooped in the background. Ayam smiled. Crow looked away, cheeks flushed. Nayako just smirked and took her place beside them. Illumina Serenity. Illumina approached slowly. Her armor still gleamed, but her eyes were no longer cold. I once destroyed entire worlds without blinking, she said. But the thought of losing you makes my hands shake. Naruto swallowed hard. You helped me feel human again, she continued. And I don't want to go back to being anything less. She removed a piece of her armor, a silver gauntlet, and placed it in his hand. My oath. Yours now. He took it, breath catching. Thank you, he said. She just nodded, then leaned in and pressed her lips softly to his, a quiet, reverent kiss. A warrior's blessing. Serena. She arrived last. Her dress still torn, her energy still flickering. But her voice? Steady. I ran away from myself. From all of you. But I never stopped loving you. She touched his chest, over his heart. I've sung across galaxies. But the only voice I ever wanted to harmonize with was yours. Tears welled in her eyes. If I die tomorrow, let it be knowing I came back to you. Naruto pulled her into a long, silent hug. They didn't need words. The shot. It happened in the quiet. A flash. A beam. A cry. The spire had begun its final phase, and it sent out a preemptive strike. Naruto turned just in time to see one of the girls step in front of him. A scream tore through the night. The blast hit her full on. She collapsed into his arms. No. Chapter 18, A New Path. POV, Naruto. She fell into his arms before he even saw the light. Her body was limp. Her energy, barely flickering. The others screamed, but their voices faded beneath the sound of his own heartbeat, pounding like war drums in his skull. He looked down. Serena. The wound had torn through her side, raw, glowing with collapse energy. It burned like nothing chakra could ever heal. No, he whispered. No, 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 stay with me. Serena's eyes fluttered open. Her lips curved into the gentlest smile. I kept my promise. I came back. And then her eyes closed. But the light didn't fade. Not completely. The bond. Naruto's chakra surged, not from rage, but from resolve. His connection to the Animamates pulsed like fire through the golden threads between them. All of them felt it. Mouse gasped, Illumina dropped to one knee, Crow flared her wings, Nayako clutched her heart, Ayam cried out. Together, they poured energy into Naruto. Not to attack. To save her. He pressed both hands to Serena's chest, guiding the energy down, weaving chakra and cosmic force in a spiral that defied death itself. Don't go, he said. We're not done singing. Serena's body glowed, a soft blue-white light, as if her soul had never left. And then, her chest rose. Her fingers twitched. Her eyes opened. She looked up at him, dazed. You caught me. Naruto broke into tears and laughter at once. Every time. The others surrounded them, sobbing, laughing, holding her. Serena was alive. The final stand. With the collapse fully awakened, the sky tore open. The stellar spire pulsed, now casting beams into the cosmos. Each second counted, entire planes could unravel if the energy wasn't sealed. The team stood atop the cliffs above the crater, looking down at the monstrous spire. Naruto turned to them all. No more running. No more waiting. We end this, together. Illumina nodded. Formation Theta. Nayako grinned. Time to make a mess. Mouse cracked her knuckles. Bet I explode more than you do. Crow smirked. Not if I get there first. Serena stood, leaning slightly on Ayam. Let's rewrite the end of our story. They moved as one. And the battle began. The collapse sealed. Naruto reached the core of the spire as the others held off the swarm. He was bleeding, bruised, but alive. The world seed hovered in front of him, unstable, humming with destructive potential. He took the silver gauntlet Illumina had given him, her vow, and plunged it into the core. The seed pulsed. Then cracked. Then imploded. A wave of light blasted out, not destruction, but healing. The stars calmed. The sky mended. The collapse was stopped. 1 year later. The village had grown. Where once there was a frontier outpost, now there were homes, gardens, children playing. And at the center of it all, standing beneath the tree where Serena had returned, was Naruto. He smiled as voices called his name. Mouse ran by with a group of kids, yelling about Rocket Honey. Crow meditated nearby, but smiled when their eyes met. Nayako trained with local guards, tail flicking with pride. Illumina sat under the tree, her armor retired, sketching constellations on paper. Ayam worked in the clinic, waving as she passed. And Serena? She approached from behind, wrapping her arms around him. I still sing in my dreams, she whispered. Naruto took her hands. So do I. Epilogue. That night, as stars filled the sky again, not trembling, but strong, the 6 women and Naruto sat by the fire. No titles. No ranks. Just souls who chose love over fear. The war was over. The exile was long past. And for the first time in his life, Naruto was home. The end. Thank you all for watching. Tatsu was with you. I hope you liked the token. If that's really the case, then put your like, subscribe to the channel and on the bell, because it's not difficult for you to do it, but it will be really nice for me.